The prairie was gray before dawn, the kind of gray that sat heavy on the chest and made a man feel like he was riding through the breath of ghosts. Wind crawled low across the grass, stirring the frost like smoke. The rancher's horse, a scarred old Mustang, snorted hard at the cold and kept glancing back. Uneasy with every step, the man on its back, Calder Reeve, a rancher who had seen more death than daylight, pulled his collar high and said under his breath, "Easy, boy. Ain't no such thing as cursed land." That's what he told himself, too. He didn't believe the stories about the burned farm up in the ridge, where no man could sleep a night without hearing a child crying through the wind. Calder just wanted soil he could afford, something to start over on after losing everything in the drought. He saw the house first, a crooked roof, a barn half collapsed, and a well standing like a gravestone in the middle of the yard. The rope above it swayed, though there wasn't any wind. The sound, that slow, wooden creak, cut through the silence like a whisper. The horse stopped dead. Wouldn't move another inch. Calder kicked once, twice, then dismounted. The dirt was soft, spongy, soaked from an old rain that hadn't done the crops any favors. He walked toward the well, boots sinking with every step. The rope twisted again as if something unseen had tugged it. Calder frowned and leaned over the edge, lantern in hand. The light reached down into the dark, catching the glimmer of water far below. Then something else, a small shape, pale as bone, swaying slow, half in shadow. He blinked. At first he thought it was a trick of light, maybe a rag caught on a beam. But then the shape turned, and he saw the outline of a tiny hand, limp in the water. A child. Calder's breath caught in his throat. His lantern trembled in his hand. The flame flared, throwing the reflection of the hanging body up the stone wall of the well, a ghostly silhouette against his own. He whispered, "Lord Almighty." The rope groaned once more, stretching under the weight. Then the lantern slipped from his fingers. It tumbled down, spinning through the darkness, flame fading to a pinprick before it hit the water below. For a moment there was only silence. Then the light went out completely. The horse whinnied and reared as thunder rolled low across the plains. Calder stumbled back, his heart hammering, staring into the black mouth of the well, that open throat of the earth that had just swallowed the last of the light. And as the dawn finally broke over the horizon, a single sound came crawling out of that darkness, a soft, wet drip, 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 followed by the faint creak of the rope turning once again. What would you have done, partner? Walked away from that well, or tried to pull the truth up from the dark. The rain came down like nails. The rancher's lantern fought to stay lit, flame bending in the wind, his breath sharp in the cold. He dragged the small body from the well, careful, though his hands shook, and laid it beside the barn under his coat. The boy's face was gray and waxy, hair tangled in the rope that had taken his life. The rancher muttered a prayer he only half remembered, and tipped his hat low against the storm. Lightning cracked across the sky, turning the whole valley white for half a heartbeat. That's when he saw her, a figure walking through the sheets of rain, small, slight, a lantern swinging in her hand. The glow cut through the mist, catching on wet grass and her torn skirt. She stopped a few yards away, voice soft but shaking. "Don't stay here." The rancher tightened his grip on the lantern handle. "Who are you?" She lifted her chin. "Eliza, I used to live here." "You shouldn't have touched him." Her voice carried something between fear and guilt. The rancher frowned, wiping water from his face. "Found him in the well," he said. "Didn't seem right to leave him there." Eliza looked past him toward the barn, eyes wide. "He don't rest easy." The rancher snorted, though unease crept into his gut. "He's a boy, not a ghost." Thunder rolled across the hills. The wind picked up, pulling at his coat. "Please," she said again, stepping closer. "The storm's coming from the east." "He comes with it." He should have asked what she meant. Instead, he gestured toward the farmhouse. "Get inside. You'll catch your death out here." She hesitated, then followed. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old wood. The rancher struck a match, lighting a single lamp that cast long shadows over the walls. The place smelled of mold and rain-soaked earth. Broken dishes lay on the table, a Bible warped by years of damp. He pulled off his gloves, set his hat aside, and looked at the stranger in the flickering light. Eliza stood near the door, dripping water, clutching the lantern like a weapon. She looked no older than 20. Her hair stuck to her cheeks, her eyes hollow. "You said you lived here," he said. "When was that?" "A long time ago," she whispered. "Before the fire." "Before the rope." The rancher's brow furrowed. "What rope?" She didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the window as the wind screamed outside, rattling the shutters. He poured a bit of whiskey into a tin cup and offered it to her. She didn't take it. "You're not scared?" she asked. He gave a tired half smile. "Seen worse things than a few ghost stories." Her voice broke as she said, "Then you ain't seen this place when the wind turns east." Lightning flared again, throwing her face into harsh relief. Pale skin, red-rimmed eyes, and something else underneath. A look that wasn't fear alone. It was recognition. The lamp flickered low. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. The rancher turned, hand on his revolver. Nothing there. When he looked back, Eliza was staring at the window, her lips moving in a silent prayer. He almost asked her what she was so afraid of. Almost. Then she whispered it, barely a breath, but heavy enough to chill the blood. "He still comes when the wind blows east." The shutters slammed open. The lantern hissed, and outside, through the sheets of rain, the rope by the barn began to sway. Morning crawled over the valley slow and gray. The rain had passed, but the clouds still hung low, thick as smoke. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and something else, old ash, the kind that sticks to your tongue and won't let go. The rancher stepped out of the doorway, boots sinking into the mud, and tried to shake the unease that clung to him like the damp. Inside the house, the walls groaned with age. Every plank had its own sound. He leaned his hand against the frame near the window, and one board shifted loose. Something glinted behind it, a small flat shine of glass. Curious, he pried the plank back. There, nailed to the wall, was a photograph yellowed from years of smoke and heat. It showed 3 faces. A man, tall and proud in his Sunday coat. A woman, tired but smiling. And between them, a boy holding a toy horse carved from wood. The rancher's stomach tightened. The photograph was nailed right above the same spot where he'd dragged that poor child's body from the well. "Don't touch that." He turned. Eliza stood in the doorway, her hands wrapped around a tin cup, eyes wide with something close to fear. She looked older in the daylight, her face worn by memories she hadn't asked to keep. "You know them?" he asked quietly. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "That's my family," she pointed to the boy in the center. "That's my brother Jonah." The name hung heavy in the room. What happened to him? Her eyes dropped to the floor. "He died here. Or maybe he was killed. The fire took most of what was left." She swallowed, her hands shaking. "My father blamed me. Said I left the lamp burning. Said I wanted to play with matches. But I didn't." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. "I swear to you I didn't." The rancher didn't answer right away. He studied the photo again. The boy's faint smile caught forever in that moment before everything turned to smoke. He knew the look of guilt, even when it wasn't earned. He'd seen it in the mirror too many times. Finally, he spoke. "You ain't the only one running from ghosts." Eliza frowned. "What do you mean?" He sighed, pulling a small leather pouch from his coat. Inside were 2 coins, a bent photograph, and a woman's ring. "My wife passed last winter. Fever took her before the snow melted. I tried to plant again come spring, but the land wouldn't grow nothin'. Lost the farm, lost myself." He gave a small, bitter laugh. "Guess I thought maybe this place would give me a second start." Fool's hope, maybe. For a moment, they just stood there listening to the wind. The fire crackled low in the hearth. The air smelled of coffee and rain. Eliza's voice softened. "You think the land ever forgets what's buried in it?" He looked at her. "No, I reckon the land remembers everything. It just waits for someone foolish enough to dig it up." They shared a faint smile. Something fragile, like light trying to break through a storm cloud. The rancher poured her another cup of coffee, then one for himself. They sat at the table, their words slow but honest, 2 broken souls trading stories to stay warm. For the first time since he'd found that body, the rancher felt something almost human again. When the cups were empty, he stood. I best feed my horse before the next rain hits. He stepped outside, boots heavy in the mud. The air had gone still, too still. The fence posts creaked like bones. His horse stood restless near the well, snorting, eyes wide. The rancher frowned and walked toward it. Something was wrong. He looked down at the spot near the barn where he'd laid the rope he'd used to pull the child's body from the well. It had been coiled neatly before, heavy and soaked from the night's storm. Now it was gone. Only a trail of wet prints remained, small ones, leading back toward the farmhouse. The rancher froze. The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of a child's laugh. Or maybe it was the house groaning again. Either way, the land wasn't done remembering. If you found that photograph, if you knew the child in your well had a name, would you stay to uncover the truth, or ride away before dark? The smoke from the chimney must have carried far that morning. By noon, I heard hooves, slow, steady, and certain. A man rode up the hill in a long brown coat and a hat that looked older than sin itself. The badge on his chest glinted dull under the gray sun. Sheriff Danner. The kind of lawman who didn't need to raise his voice to make a threat. He reined his horse near the gate, eyes scanning the house like he already knew what ghosts lived here. Didn't think anyone was fool enough to try this place again, he said. His voice was dry as bone. I stepped down from the porch, brushing the dirt from my hands. I ain't here for stories, I said. Just trying to work the land, he snorted. You're the third fool to say that. The last two didn't finish their first month. He looked at the well, its stones dark and wet from last night's rain. Then his gaze settled on me, sharp as a knife. What did you find down there? I hesitated. Eliza was standing behind the screen door, pale and quiet. The wind tugged at her hair, but she didn't move. I found a rope, I said finally, and a child still tied to it. The sheriff's face didn't change, but his jaw worked once. He looked at Eliza, then back at me. You're keeping bad company, he muttered, spitting into the mud. That girl's been part of this mess since it started. Eliza's voice broke through the screen door. Don't talk about me like I ain't here. Danner turned in his saddle, tipping his hat just enough to hide his eyes. You should have left this farm to the wind, Eliza. It remembers what you done. I didn't do nothing, she said, shaking her head. Her voice was trembling. You know that? He didn't answer her. He just stared at me, long and heavy. You dig too deep into this land, rancher. You'll end up under it. He tugged the reins and turned his horse around. The hooves faded slow into the distance, like thunder rolling away. Then the wind shifted. It came from the east, cold, sharp, carrying a sound I couldn't name. The door behind me creaked open without a hand on it. Eliza stepped back, whispering, "No." Across the floor, a small wooden toy rolled out of the shadows. A child's horse, carved and cracked. It stopped right at my boots. I bent to pick it up. The moment my fingers touched it, the air went still. No sound. No wind. Just that small toy, dripping water onto the floorboards. Out here, warnings don't come with mercy. The West has its way of telling you when to quit, but most men never listen until it's too late. What would you have done? Left the land, or kept digging for the truth? The morning came pale and heavy with fog, the kind that rolls low across the fields like ghosts that don't know where to rest. The rain from last night had softened the earth. Every step sank a little, slow and heavy. The rancher stood beside the well, hat in hand, staring into that dark hole where the rope had hung. He'd seen many ugly things in his life, fires, floods, even war, but nothing that twisted his stomach like that small, still body pulled from the black water. He couldn't leave the child lying there in the barn, not like that, so he fetched a shovel. When Eliza came out of the house, her face was pale, her eyes rimmed red. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Giving the boy a place to rest," he said. She hesitated, then nodded. "By the apple tree," she whispered. "That's where Mama used to sing." They worked side by side in silence. The shovel bit deep into the wet soil, the earth turning dark and rich. The scent of rain and rot mixed in the air. Each thud of the shovel sounded like a heartbeat fading. When the grave was ready, they carried the small form wrapped in canvas. Eliza knelt first, touching the bundle with shaking hands. "I used to braid his hair," she said softly. "He'd cry if I pulled too hard, The rancher said nothing. Words didn't fit a moment like this. He only bowed his head and began to cover the child with soil. Each scoop was slower than the last. When it was done, he pressed his palms flat against the mound, whispering a prayer he only half remembered. They built a small cross from fence wood. Eliza tied a strip of her dress around it, a faded blue, torn at the edge. She lit 2 candles at the base, their flames trembling in the wind. For a moment, it felt peaceful. But the land wasn't finished with them. By sundown, the rancher started repairing the farmhouse, nailing boards across broken windows, patching leaks in the roof. The rhythm of hammer and nail steadied him. It made the place feel less like a graveyard, more like a home. Eliza cooked beans and cornbread, and for the first time, the house smelled of life instead of decay. When the candles burned out, he stepped outside. The fog had thickened again. The air was cool, almost kind. He thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind them. Then he saw them, footprints, small ones, muddy and fresh, leading from the new grave straight to the farmhouse steps. He followed them inside, his boots squelching in the dirt. The lamp on the table flickered weakly, and there it was, right in the center of the table, the boy's toy horse, dripping wet. The candle flame shuddered, then went out. What would you have done if you found that toy on your table? Would you stay or ride through the night and never look back? The night fell fast, too fast. The sky went from copper to black in a single breath, the kind of black that swallows firelight and memory alike. The wind came first, not gentle, not wild, but screaming, a living thing tearing through the valley, as if it wanted something back. Inside the farmhouse, the lanterns trembled. One went out, then another. The shadows began to move, not from flame or man, but from something that walked where air should be still. The rancher set his back to the door, pressing the latch shut. His voice came low, ragged. Get the boards. Nail 'em down. Eliza didn't argue. Her hands shook as she hammered wood over the windows. Her knuckles were white as bone, her eyes wide like she was seeing something the rancher couldn't. Why are they coming? He asked. She didn't look at him. They're not coming for me. The words hit harder than the wind. The storm clawed at the roof, pulling at every nail, every board. The old house groaned like it remembered the fire that once burned it down. The rancher's breath misted in front of him, colder with each gust. Then came the laughter. Faint at first, the sound of a boy's laugh caught in the wind. But it grew, stretching thin, echoing through the valley like a memory trying to breathe again. Eliza froze. Her hammer fell to the floor. It's him, she whispered. It's my brother. The rancher stepped closer, his jaw set. You said he was gone. I lied. She turned, tears carving lines down her dusty cheeks. The truth came out between sobs and thunder. My father did it. He killed him. He hung him above the well to hide it. Said the boy brought shame to the family. When I tried to stop him, she shook her head. The fire took the rest. Mama, the house, all of it. He said if I ever spoke, he'd tell everyone it was me. She covered her mouth, choking on the rest. The rancher's eyes were steady, hard as river stones. The ghosts ain't yours then, she nodded slowly. They're his. The wind shifted again, sharper, colder, like the land itself was listening. Outside, the well began to creak. The rope that had been still all day now moved, slow at first, then faster, as if something was climbing up from the dark. Creak. The sound grew deeper, heavier. Creak! Until the rope snapped. The crash that followed shook the floorboards. Something small hit the dirt just outside the door, soft but heavy enough to make both of them jump. The rancher grabbed his rifle and pushed open the door. Rain lashed across his face. Lightning lit the yard white as bone, and there, standing by the well, was the child. The boy's head hung low, rope marks still red around his neck. His eyes hollow but calm, not hateful, not lost, just waiting. Water dripped from his hair, running down a face that looked almost peaceful. Eliza fell to her knees. Oh, God. It's really him. The boy turned. Not to her. To the barn. The wind carried whispers, words in voices that weren't there. The air filled with the smell of smoke, the kind that clings to your soul. The rancher could see faint shapes swirling in the mist. A man's silhouette, broad, cruel, clutching a rope. "Eliza," the rancher said, grabbing her arm. "He ain't coming for you." "He's coming for him." Lightning split the sky. The barn door slammed open. Inside, the old hanging beam groaned under invisible weight. The noose swayed, though no one stood beneath it. The rope began to twist. The rancher's instincts kicked in. He grabbed his axe from the porch. "Stay here." Eliza reached for him, panic in her voice. "Don't. You'll make it worse." He looked back just once. Can't be worse than it already is. He ran into the storm, boots sinking into the mud. The barn loomed before him, every board screaming with wind and age. The inside flickered with ghostly light, pale blue like lightning trapped inside the walls. There, hanging from the beam, was the shape of a man, shifting between smoke and flesh. The ghost of her father. The rope cut into his neck as unseen hands tightened it. The rancher raised the axe. "No peace for you, old man." He swung. The blade hit the beam just as lightning struck the roof. The flash was blinding. The sound was the end of worlds. The barn erupted in flame. Instant, bright, holy. The storm fed it instead of killing it. Wind whipped through the open doors, scattering sparks like judgment. Eliza screamed his name from the farmhouse porch. Through the fire, the rancher saw the boy, standing at peace for the first time, his small face turning toward the flames. The ghost reached out one last time, not for his sister, not for vengeance, but for light. His hand touched the air, then he was gone. The rope burned to ash. The fire climbed high, roaring against the storm. The rancher stumbled back, coughing smoke, half blind but alive. Eliza ran toward him, tears and rain mixing on her face. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking. "It's over, Eliza, it's over." She looked past him to the barn. "No," she whispered. "It's just beginning." The roof collapsed, sparks raining down like dying stars. The wind softened at last, turning gentle, tired. For the first time in years, the land stopped screaming. The rancher fell to his knees in the mud. The rain poured down, cooling the earth, washing away the ashes, the blood, the past, and in the silence that followed, they both heard it, a boy's voice, faint and free, carried on the wind. "Thank you." The storm moved east and the prairie slept again. Dawn crept slow over the valley, quiet and gray. The storm had passed, leaving only the sound of dripping rain and the soft hiss of smoke. The barn was nothing but a blackened frame now, a ribcage of charred wood jutting against the pale sky. The ground steamed where the fire had fed, and the air smelled of rain and ash and something older. Like peace finally exhaled. The well, once a mouth of darkness, was filled to the brim. Rainwater shimmered inside it, still, clean, untouched. No rope, no bones, no curse. Just reflection. The rancher stood over it, his coat torn, his face streaked with soot and blood. His hands shook when he touched the rim. It was cold, solid, real. He whispered, "It's done," though he wasn't sure who he was saying it to. The land, the boy, or the ghosts that had watched it all unfold. Behind him, Eliza knelt by a mound of wet soil. The grave was fresh, the wood of the cross still pale. Her hands were clasped tight, knuckles white, as she hummed a soft tune, the same lullaby she said her mother used to sing by the apple tree. The sound carried across the yard, broken but beautiful, floating like smoke. The rancher felt it crawl into the spaces the fire had emptied. He limped closer, every step leaving black streaks of mud behind. His hat was gone, burned somewhere in the blaze. The side of his face was blistered, but his eyes were steady. He looked at her, really looked, and saw something in her he hadn't before. Not sorrow, not guilt, just quiet freedom, the kind that costs a soul its weight in years. Eliza touched the cross once more, then rose slowly. Her dress was torn, streaked with ash, but she stood straight, calm. She turned to the old apple tree, the one that had been bare for years, and gasped softly. White blossoms had opened in the dawn, tiny, perfect, trembling flowers against the blackened field. The rancher stared, his breath caught in his throat. For the first time he could smell sweetness under the smoke. He spoke, voice low. "That tree was dead." Eliza smiled faintly. "Not dead, just waiting." For a moment neither of them said another word. The sun broke through the mist, painting gold over ruin. The burned boards gleamed wet and red, like a wound healing from the inside. Eliza turned toward the dirt road, her shadow long against the pale mud. "I should go," she said. "It's time. Where will you go?" the rancher asked. She looked back once, eyes softer than dawn. "Home." He wanted to ask more, but his throat closed. The word home echoed like a prayer he'd forgotten. She walked down the road, fading into the fog. With each step, the air grew brighter, the sound of her boots quieter, and then she was gone. The rancher looked back at the apple tree, its blossoms swaying in the breeze. He took a breath that tasted like smoke and rain, then whispered, "Rest easy." A bird landed on the cross beside the grave, shook its feathers, and began to sing. He tipped his head to it, as if it could hear him. Then slowly he turned toward the horizon. Behind him the well glimmered. The water was still, the air was clean, and for the first time in years, the land felt alive again. In the West, some ghosts don't haunt you to hurt you. They stay to make sure you remember. The fire took the sin, but the rain brought the truth. And if you ever find an apple tree blooming after the storm, don't forget to listen.